Hello everyone, welcome back to the Silver Screen Dudes. My name is Nico Luro, host here on the channel. And I am blessed, honored and humbled today to be joined by activists, artists and filmmakers and actors. I mean, all rolled into one big crazy melting pot. I've got Heather Ackroyd, Dan Harvey and Fiona Cunningham, the director of the Art of Activism, all joining me today. Thank you for joining me on the channel. How are you all?
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And thank you all for making what was a really intriguing documentary, which asked a lot of big questions, I think. And I'd actually like to throw one of those big questions at you now. Very, very, topical. What is art to you
My
all?
goodness. You know, I actually have a book which has that on the title, What is Art, by Joseph Beuys. And as you'll have seen from the film, we've been growing acorns that we collected from his masterwork, 7,000 Oaks. Yep. He first did the planting starting in 1982, and the planting was finished in 87. We collected the acorns in 2007. But that was one of his books, What is Art? I think now we can see artists literally dissolving boundaries between disciplines. So we're not just talking between photography and sculpture. That's been going on for some time, but artists stepping into neuroscience, artists working with bioregenerative farmers, working with economists, working with philosophers, psychologists. So I think what is art now is an incredibly broad spectrum.
Fiona, same.
I think for me,
yeah.
I think for me, art comes, or the roots of it come from observation and wanting to communicate things. And I think maybe if I was better with words, I would be a writer. If I could move better, I'd be a dancer. It's a creative energy and a way of communicating. And for me, doing that visually is what intrigues me and what I find important.
Yeah, and for me, I haven't really been involved much with art or artists before, and this film did come about very muchly from being excited by Extinction Rebellion and protests, and then I knew Dan and Heather a little bit through friends, and then I started to understand their art a bit more, and I was fascinated by it because actually, what is art? They had these grass banners and they were out there, and then you delved a bit more. And the more I got to know them, the more interesting it is. And my partner also asked to say, one of the great things about the film is that it does pose that question. And it's really good for students and for anybody. What is art? And at the end of the film, when they said, our grass is art, we could be art. And I think that's just the best throwaway line ever.
We could be art was very good. I did chuckle. On the note of your grass art, I thought the coats especially were incredible, and those murals you did, I mean, really inspired. And yeah, I love that blending of worlds between nature and traditional art. I thought that was very clever. Now, the idea for this movie, Fiona, you just alluded a bit how you were drawn to Extinction Rebellion, but how did the idea for this movie come about, and how did you all come into contact with each other to make it possible?
Well, we as I said, we did sort of know each other vaguely, and then I was talking to a friend of mine about Extinction Rebellion. She said, "Oh, don't forget Heather and Dan. They're really into protests, and they're really into saving the planet and eco-conservation and everything." So I hooked up with them, and we went to some of the very early meetings of XR. And so I hung out with them, and then it quickly became apparent that it's very hard to make a film enjoyable just about protests and people on the streets and the shouting and the traffic and the holding up and the getting arrested and all this stuff. We've seen it before on the news. And it suddenly realized, of course, this is a much better way to take it. And the more I got to know them, the more, they're so interesting. Everything they touch has an element of, as they said, architecture, activism. So it just became very clear that to follow them, I'd be able to tell more of their story. Because like Dan said, I'm not an artist, I'm not a filmmaker, but I can help to amplify other people's voices. And that's what I hope to do, to draw more people into everything that we care about. And that's, I think, what we are doing. It provokes questions, not only what is art, but what's happening with protests, and also it's a bit more optimistic. I feel our film. You come out, you don't feel like hopeless. You kind of feel, oh, there is a community out there. There are all these lovely people, and their work does bring in people. And every time they do a project, it's always an invitation to someone else to join in and to spread it further, and it reaches out. And I hope that's what we are doing with this film as well. And it started very humbly. I'd just like to say, I was talking to the editor today, and Catherine said, "Can you imagine, from my broken screen on the computer, and now we're in cinema?" So it's fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a strange place to film more than art world takes you. Heather and Dan, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think I think it was great in a way that, we had that connection again with Fiona. Fiona was there at the very, very first Extinction Rebellion, when everybody was kind of collecting with Greta Thunberg. It was the first time I'd ever been introduced to Greta. And, already, and I wasn't familiar with, when I started suddenly seeing people lying down on the road and being carried off actually at that point, the police weren't carrying them off, just lying down on the road. I was sort of thinking, well, this is a different level of campaigning and protest. I'd been involved in the anti-poll tax riots back in the 1980s, and Dan's family were very involved with the CND and sort of marches as well. So I think XR took it to a whole nother level, and the level that there are a lot of people who were in kind of distress about what was happening around the earth, about the degradation, about the rising fossil fuel emissions, but also about the fact that extinctions were happening at such a rapid rate as well of species. So I think XR kind of like just crystallized a lot of people's angst and a lot of people's desire to suddenly come together. And we would bump into friends, we made new friends, we would witness spectacles and sights that were just quite simply jaw-dropping. Like the Pink Boat at Oxford. And also the very initiation of XR just started to us think, well, what is culture's response? Like we're part of a really broad, as I've said, we kind of, culture moves between heritage and can move right through into architecture and design as well. So we were part of a group of really kind of tenacious people, and very creative and very recognized artists in their own right, setting up Culture Declares Emergency, co-founding.
I think that's one thing for me. XR visually, really, they had a curatorial sort of view of it. The choreography between some of the demonstrations, some of the marches, their visual presentation, the graphics they used, the colors, the wood blocks by Miles Glynn, the whole thing was very, very well choreographed and visually stunning. The boat bolted to the center of Oxford Circus for 11 days, used as a stage. It was very, very well honed and very well carried out. But we were aware that certain cultural institutions maybe couldn't be seen to be supporting non-violent civil disobedience. So, which is why Culture Declares was launched, that was co-founded by a large group of us.
Yeah, and so, you spoke about community just now, and the hope that having like-minded people gathering for this for what is ultimately a good cause, motivated by a hopeful future. But I'm speaking just so you've got some context of where I'm coming from for this next one. I spent the best part of 10-15 years working as an underwater cinematographer. My big thing was shark preservation, so seeing shark populations dwindle around the world really did a number on me, and I wanted to do something about that, so I did what I could. And relating this now to you, much similar to what I went through with shark preservation, it does seem to have got to a point now in the world where people aren't just exercising their right to be out of sight, out of mind, which in itself is a massive problem. We've got voted in world leaders now, no need to mention names, we all know who I'm talking about, who are going as far as to claim that global warming is, quote, a myth, when it's scientifically been proven to be true. So the call for action, you know, activism and to save the planet, it's become somehow even more difficult. So you've got this combined duality of people have an innate, and I saw it with people who I was diving with. You know, they'd come and dive with me with the sharks one year, and, you know, they'd get very into activism. They'd buy into the message I was saying that, hey, these are the things you can do to make sure we're not killing these animals. And then, you know, they'd go home motivated, but within a few weeks, it would all be like, biff, out of sight, out of mind. That in itself is something I think we all have as human beings, which is bad. But now we're actually going as far as to vote in people who are damaging to preserving the future of the planet. So the message is so hard to get across now. What can we possibly do to overcome this, do you all think? Big question.
I think, yeah, no, it's a really good question. And, you know, I mean, there's sort of this sort of like President Orange who's napalming all of these, you know, hard won and respected before he came to office laws and environmental legislation. There's one side of me that actually thinks it was always going to come to this. I just sort of feel, in a way, maybe I have watched too many dystopian movies. And, you know, I mean, it's almost like sometimes I'm witnessing what's happening in America, and it seems like it's a kind of a Black Mirror version of Batman. And, you know, and you can see the president almost playing out these roles between the Joker and, you know, and the Penguin, and it's all of these sort of like archetypal bad characters. But they will turn around and they see us as a bad characters. They see us equally complicit. So we're...
Carry on. I've got you on screen. Don't you worry.
Yeah, that's great. So we're in this really, really kind of, you know, we're in this very, very perverse how we perceive each other. But what I always come back to is that I actually feel that there are so many people now, you know, we're nearly 100 years where every woman, irrespective of her birth or her kind of social status class, has a vote. And I know this isn't everywhere in the world, and I know Afghanistan is very serious as well. But we have people, I think there is a much more broader swathe of people who are well educated and are holding positions of responsibility, and they're looking at what they can do in their way to counter this dark force, to counter this aggressiveness. And that's what gives me hope, is that I think, and you know, people are having to move in very, very canny ways now. But I think it is, I really do think it will shift to the way we wish it to go.
I mean, I hope you're right, Heather.
And it's simple economics as well, because, you know, obviously all our resources are finite and they're pretending they're not. And the amount, for example, you know, obviously the water that's being used now to house these huge databases, they don't even have to pay for it. You know, we've just given license to the states. They can use as much of our water as they like to house this. But there are lots of insurance companies saying, you know, in the next 10 years, everything is uninsurable. It doesn't work. But everyone's ignoring it, even the financial people. But it's insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
Well, we can all agree that it's insane. Lost Dan. I'm going to switch over to 3. We can all agree that it's insane. But I mean, the question does remain. You know, that what the hell do we do about it? Because you're not now only fighting this out of sight, out of mind mentality. You're fighting against unfairly powerful leaders who are at best ignorant, and at worst, you know, there's darker forces at work. And people don't see, I don't know how to say this without coming off as really, really combative, but people seem to almost not be smart enough to see this isn't a good man you're voting in. Like, the fact that there's a debate about this is what boggles the mind. And you know, we're having to fight forces like that. And I'll move on to the next one here because it's related. You know, we take it down from a level from, you know, the president of the United States. And I remember in 2019, 2020 during the pandemic era when a lot of what Extinction Rebellion were doing was happening, and I remember the coverage it was getting was just marred with negativity. You had people like Piers Morgan, who was like almost taking some sort of sadistic joy in the fact that oh, we're closing down the roads and I'm going to attempt a gotcha by asking you, do you eat avocados? Oh, that means you're shipping them in. It's like, oh, for Christ's sake, see the bigger picture. And and that comes into the difficulty again. What can we do about not just the presidency, but the way that the media were perceiving XR? Like, how do you fight that?
I mean, I think there is an enthrallment that we have with the bigot and the bully. When somebody behaves so appallingly, everybody stand there and is rather perversely mesmerized by it. Yeah. And I've heard people now saying that the more liberal, more progressive, or whatever terms is used to describe, need to kick back. There needs to be much more edge and a lot more pushback, and that's to be debated. I mean, I think one thing is yesterday when the president was at Windsor, led by donkeys who are absolutely incredible, and I take my hat off to them, did a massive, great projection onto the Windsor Castle Tower, which was footage of Trump and Epstein. Now, this is, I think, one thing we cannot let that go. We just have to keep our eye. I mean, there's a glare. Obviously, there is something there. And that's one side, the bigger picture, just making sure that this is, nobody's getting off this hook, I think is incredibly important. The other thing that's happened in this country, I think, over the 5 to 10 years is there's been a lot more people moving to do regeneration of land, that the plight of creatures and species, there is a lot more active work that is going on. And I'm hoping under Labour, and where there are obviously Green councillors as well, this is going to help. But we have a fight. There's no doubt we have a fight, but we've always had a fight, I think.
But also, Heather, you were talking the other day about how much good has been done. When you talked about the rising temperatures were actually predicted to go to, what was it, 7 or something, and now actually they are much lower than they thought they would be at this present time. And those things can't be ignored. They are tiny little improvements. And then there's COP30, which says it all, coming up in a minute. And I'm sure that'll reveal a lot of stuff. But I'd leave that to Heather. Yeah, no,
it's very, very true, Fiona. I mean, there is a huge amount of work that has happened in the last 20 years. In 2005, we were invited to the University of Oxford. It was a 2-day sort of an invitation of leading global climate scientists, social scientists, and artists from, writers right across to filmmakers. And there were some notable people there. Philip Pullman, it was fantastic to meet him. And everybody was kind of like putting their creative thinking and scientific thinking into the pot. And at that point, it was looking at a 6-degree temperature rise by sort of within the next century and a half, and that's been pulled back by collective action, on a small level, but on the micro level along with the macro level. I mean, yes, what Trump might do is incendiary and could be very damaging, but I am hoping that there are enough allegiances in collective practice in place to try and do what is necessary to hold what's being put in place. And you're back, Dan.
Yeah. And the media is of course one of the worst criminals and culprits. The way they report stuff, from terrorists being Extinction Rebellion labels terrorists, and now anyone that stands up for the plight of the genocide going on in Gaza is labelled a terrorist and carted off.
No, I know.
And young people can't get a criminal record. They want to be out there protesting, but they don't want to start their lives with this. I mean, they'll be just screwed forever. It's terrifying. So the more positive stuff we can get out there, the more people to participate, the better. Just bit by bit.
Well, look, there's this movie, at least the timing of me watching it was so timely, with the murder of Charlie Kirk last week, and it's raised all sorts of questions about freedom of speech. And I think what's been very telling is how freedom of speech seems to be a one-way streak. It's it's fine until you're on the receiving end of it. And I just feel that was something that was very, very much linked to what XR were doing in this movie. It's like, this is we have a right to do this, but the moment it's, you know, pushing the envelope a bit far, now we're terrorists and now we're criminals. And
exactly. I mean, the Police and Crime Sentencing Bill under the under the previous Conservative government was very, very, very draconian, and Labour are not showing any signs of easing that. The Liberals and the Greens would. I think they would let that go. So I think that we have to look again politically where the influence and the power is on a local level. I mean, they wanted to drill for oil up here in our woods, an area of outstanding natural beauty. So that started in about 2008. It was 10 years of concerted protest on so many levels, to the point that there were sort of people living in the, activists moving into the wood and living there, but very respectfully, never lighting a fire. The community would come together and make sure they had hot food during the harder months, and they had everything they needed to kind of live as they were doing. But it was won. That battle was won. And I think so much that we've taken for granted now, the weekend, labor rights, women's rights, animal rights, civil rights, have come to be hard, just keeping up there. And it's great to have the conversation with you. It's fantastic to know about your work with sharks. We work at the David Attenborough Building, the Cambridge Conservation Initiative. They have wins. They're bringing creatures back from the species. Sorry, they're bringing species back from the brink.
Yeah,
because people do care, and that's what matters.
And sharks, I think that's demonized, haven't they?
Yeah,
sharks are always portrayed as terrible, dangerous things. Sorry,
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I'm sorry, I dropped out there. My internet is slow here in the hills, but I think the thing with nature is that it's incredibly powerful. If you give it space, it comes back. But we keep on cutting away from it, and I'm not sure what was said earlier in the time that I wasn't online here, but I think there's so much false information that is being put out there, and it's a matter of saying and raising awareness that this just isn't true, and yet it seems to get swept aside, and on we go. So yeah, it's complex.
Well, yeah, so I mean, on that note, Dan, it's what I said when you're off, is that it doesn't just get swept aside. It's XR. I mean, listen, my best friend, who's a co-host with me on this very channel, I remember when we had started doing this around COVID time, and unfortunately, his words to me were, when I started talking about Extinction Rebellion, he went, "Oh, what, those idiots who are causing traffic jams and attaching themselves to the trains?" I'm like, yes, those, but it's the point of what they're doing, not the actions that they're doing to get your attention. Have you stopped to think about that? He was like, "Mate, I just need to get to work in the morning. I don't have time to think about this." And I said, that's the problem.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's
very
good.
good.
And that's my best friend I said that to,
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we had a friend that was driving up from Cornwall who rang up and said, "Oh, I'm not going to come. There are all those terrorists on the streets. I'm really scared and frightened." I thought, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? But we do win. I mean, I was, founding member of Stonewall years and years and years ago, and made films about gay marches and the Sydney Lesbian Gay Mardi Gras, and then the AIDS epidemic. All these things, and things do come through. They can win. Protests do work. But this one is, when it affects the whole world, seems to be bizarrely the opposite. It's even harder. It affects all of us.
No, it does. It does. And people don't realize that. It's like, give me over to you.
Yeah. When we were part of that locking down at the Easter Rebellion, Extinction Rebellion, Easter Rebellion, and we were in the Marble Arch, sort of, glamping it in the tents. And people who lived, in the vicinity would come up and actually thank us and say, "Can I bring you anything?" And we're saying it's the first time that they felt they could breathe unpolluted air. The first time they could hear the birds properly during the day, rather than having to go out really, at early morning to hear them. And there was gratitude there that was being expressed to us. And what I just think the majority of people want stability. They want a peaceful existence, and they want to be able to know that the water they drink is clean. There's simplicity to how people want to live. And, I just think that it's a very, very small proportion of people who are trying to have power over, the boot on the face, or the billionaire, control now over the airwaves. And this is what we have to keep resisting. But it is, as you say, creating more resilience, creating more community, and more people feel they have a voice to do something.
Yeah, and it does give me hope that the next generation seem to very much care for this cause, as the movie showed, and as I experience daily. I mean, I've got my 3-year-old daughter who's asking me questions about sharks already. It's like, okay, fantastic. Good, we're on the right track.
Very, very much so.
What I find interesting is when I was a child at school, 17, 18, we were being led to believe that going forward we would have much more leisure time. Maybe it'd be a 3-day working week, that everything would get easier. And that's totally possible. It's just that things have shifted, that instead of us getting that free time, we're all trapped in this work, money situation, put under stress where we don't have, maybe you lose the will to fight against things when you're under stress like that. And this is so that the money gets siphoned up. There's not a trickle-down effect. It's being sucked away from us, and our freedoms are being sucked away from us, left, right, and center. And it's not necessary at all. But that's a society we're living in at the moment. It needs to change.
No, it does need to change. All right, to all of you then. I mean, I have a feeling, Fiona, you may have a different answer to Dan and Heather. What was the most challenging part of the production, and how did you overcome it?
I think it was probably when it got so intimate and personal between the two of them. And then it was like, we better stand back. The film had a sort of could have gone into a sort of Mills and Boone type thing, or like they tried to save the planet, but could they save their relationship, or that sort of thing. And so then it was very much hands off, let's take a breather. And then the breather became more because we had cancer issues. My editor's husband got very ill and then died. So it just gave up for a year. And then slowly, everybody started to pick up and started to look at the footage, and there was so much of it. I thought, we can't give up. We can't. So that was the hardest bit, was just to keep going after such a long gap in the middle. And would it be relevant, or would it just be archive? But actually, I think it's worked quite well that we stuck with it and showed that big passage of time. And indeed, their relationship, which reflected so many other friends and what they went through COVID, and honesty. And I respect and love them for it so much that they allowed me, into their lives in that way.
Heather and Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the entering into the lockdown of the pandemic, and then Dan and I went into crisis, and I think the film doesn't. I think I felt very protective of our daughter, who was actually living with me at the time. Dan was living around the corner, and I also felt I just felt too sort of ripped apart at that time to sort of be able to bare my soul to the camera, to Fiona. And we discussed it. I also felt very strongly I didn't want the film to become a soap opera about the emotion about our relationship. I wanted really important that the bigger meta narrative around the operatic scale of the climate change was the one that was kind of like very much driving the narrative. And I think and Fiona was very, and we could be very open and honest with her, but I also just didn't want it to become I didn't want it to become a mudslinging kind of thing either. That was important. And Dan and I are still working together. We'll still trying. Well, it's not possible for me to develop a new body of work at the moment because I'm very much staying behind Boyce's Acorns, getting the trees in the ground. But I think we'll probably give each other a bit more space to follow our own pursuits as we go forward.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most difficult part within the film, was talking about our personal relationships, and yet it was fundamental to our lives. Relationships aren't easy, and at times things don't work out the way that one would hope, and there are all sorts of reasons for that. And there's sides of me that would have liked to have brought in some more of those reasons, but it didn't seem fair or relevant, or information that needed to be out there. So yeah, it's that side of it is very personal, but I think those things also need to be voiced.
Well,
and Adele, their daughter, just quickly, Adele, their daughter, during this time, I can't remember if she said it to me or to whom, but she said to them, "Well, Mum and Dad, now she's got her story. You're going through all this." And I said, "No, that really stopped. That was it. We stopped filming."
Yeah.
She was very funny and very protective, beautifully. It was lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was nice seeing her on screen. I do have to say though, you've curtailed into my next question quite nicely, because it was when we started talking about your personal lives that I raised an eyebrow a bit, because for most of the movie you were both very much presented as being a united front artistically and conservationally, I guess. Morally you're on the same wavelength. There were fleeting insinuations of your relationship throughout the movie, but it's in that last 10 minutes you kind of lifted the curtain up and it got quite intimate and personal, I think purposefully so. But my question, I guess, would be, why was the decision made right at the end of the movie to kind of take a left turn and pull the curtain back and reveal more about your personal relationships?
You're going to take that one, Fiona?
In terms of the editing, well, I just thought, because exactly what you say, they were the Ackroyd and Harvey is in a way like a brand, and they work together and they present their work together and all of that. But I didn't really ever get into what I knew about them. I didn't feel that I knew them as people, as individuals, and how they work together. And I remember some other artists were asking me, they said, "Oh my God, I'm fascinated by how people can work together as artists, because I could never do that with my husband, my wife, my partner." So that side of that, the film would really, really interest me. And then, so Catherine and I started to hone in, and I thought, well, yes, it is time that we became intimate and made the film personal, and people can relate to it much more than just seeing art, because so many art films, not a front, but they just let the art speak for themselves. But the people behind it are fascinating, I mean, gosh. So I think it came alive. Although a lot of people older even than me were saying, "I didn't like that squabbling bit." But everyone, like my goddaughter, "Oh my God, that was fantastic. They're so honest. Wow, look at them both. And look at his face, or look at hers." I thought, okay.
Yeah, it's it is slightly nuanced. I mean, I think it's just very, when you're out on the street with banners talking about truth, to then look into your own relationship and be asking for the same. And I think, truth did come out, and it was very painful. It was very difficult. As Dan says, one can justify and have different reasons why things may happen at times. But I think truth for me is an absolute bedrock of any relationship. I think the way I want to kind of move forward is that we have a body of work that still needs protecting and nurturing. The trees, Boyce's Acorns, and I feel incredibly responsible for the trees. And obviously during the pandemic things slowed down. The trees suddenly got bigger. We couldn't move them because of oak processionary moth. But that's something that I'm completely committed to working on. I love the trees. When people actually talk about forest bathing, I'll go to the circle where the trees are, and I tell you, those trees, they give back. I mean, they almost give back more to me than a dog or a cat does now.
I think we've nurtured those trees for so long that they are very much part of the family too. There are elements with the scene at the end, towards the end of the film, where we're talking about personal relationships, and I think they could have been a lot more said, but at the same time, it would have maybe been disingenuous to go down that route and to end up in more of a squabbling situation, which I hope it doesn't come across like that. I think we both have our strengths and we both have our direction that we want to go in. And I think there was an article today in The Guardian saying that we were going our separate ways, and this isn't true. We do have projects that will go ahead. And Ackroyd and Harvey, I hate the word brand, but it is something that
Don't use it.
after 34 years of us working within a certain way, there is a strength there, and we work very well together. We have our own separate skills, and I think whatever our separate works might be, it will be very different than what Ackroyd and Harvey can be.
I mean, there was such, Dan and I felt we were like alchemical twins, or these sort of alchemical presences. Our interests were slightly more arcane than scientific when we first met, and there was a very, very deep love, and we brought this beautiful daughter into being, into the world as well. And I really do respect when we can work on ideas together. We've got such a vocabulary and such a huge experience between us now. And I just want to add a small thing. I was reading an interview with, I think it was quite well-known actor comedian, and he never talks about his private life. He says that's sacred. And we'll talk about the work. And I was suddenly thinking, oh God, we kind of like, it's our private life sacred. And here we are kind of not bearing all, but bearing enough. And I suddenly thought, no, actually, for me, the work is sacred. The Grass Church, Voices, Acorns, and actually the relationship is human. That's very, very human, and as we said, so many people during the pandemic lockdown were struggling with their relationship. So felt honest to say what we said.
I think during lockdown, so many people never spent so much time apart together. And for Heather and I, we never actually spent so much time apart than during lockdown. So it's a very different sort of set of situations, really.
Yeah, it was a very interesting dynamic. So $1,000,000 question then. What are you hoping people take away from this movie?
Hope, optimism, and feeling. Oh yes, we shouldn't give up. There are lovely people out there. Of course, we must continue. We just got to get away from the noise. And I think it was Dan said, or Heather, just get out there into nature, go and meet other people, and just we can't give up. Well, don't let the bastards get you down. Yeah.
I think the endless possibility that creativity can bring is something that is amazing. And I think the beauty of nature, I mean, I think I've said in the past that, it's, if you're feeling really stressed out, go out and look at nature. If you can get into a forest or into a wilderness, wonderful. If you can't do that, just get out into your backyard or a park, observe it. And, even if it's down to the smallest thing of a little plant somewhere growing between the paving stones, if you start to look around you, there is so much wonder out there. And it's amazing, this planet that we live on. So gain or draw from that is what I would say. And hopefully that film sort of links you into that sort of level of observation of the natural world around us.
Can I say one more thing? Sorry, Heather, one more thing that I do regret that is not in the film is how brilliant these two are with children and education and the way they go into universities and classes and art colleges and schools. It's such a shame we didn't have it there, but that's what we need, is more people to go into the classroom, help young people appreciate and understand more about our world.
Yeah.
But,
it's a sequel.
It's I was really interested hearing you talk about your, the many years that you were diving and working around the conservation of sharks, which are kind of what's called like a the top end predator. And nature, I was just saying, I was once watched this spider and a wasp landed in the web, and the spider just wrapped it so quickly in the silk. I'd never seen anything like that before, but I was just observing it for that moment. And I think, just talking about the alchemy of what Dan and I have done with making this discovery that we can make these biochemical photographs, we just came across that because we kept pushing certain boundaries and our curiosity and playfulness as well. And, we've discovered something which, is very special. And I just think the playfulness, curiosity, and also I think it's really important not to feel threatened, not to let situations or the bigger picture undo you or bully you. I think it's really important to keep strength. And every day I will take a walk or a cycle out to the woods and the parks and just, be there. And something will happen, and I go, it's all right. I go back home and I feel much better.
It's lovely. I love that. All right, let's end it on this. What's next for you all with regards to your art and your activism? What can we expect from you next?
So, I'm actually about to go up to an opening. We've put in a piece of work called Seeing Red Overdrawn, which is 4,744 critically endangered species, printed very faintly, which people then will overwrite, so it brings it to visibility. So that's at the Museum of Unrest, Greater X Street, Whitechapel, and it's called Right to Protest. And then there's the other one coming up, isn't there, down the gallery? We can't talk too much about that because it's yet to be fully released.
That launches in October, but is linked in with COP30 in Brazil and posters being put around within the UK and also in Brazil, but some of our photosynthesis works. We're still obviously very much involved with trying to get our Boyce's acorn trees roots in the ground in circles of 7. We have an event coming up in Vicenza and something on the cards in Vienna. So there are a number of works coming up, and they're also, there are many different things. I think, as Fiona mentioned, the ideas of doing perhaps more work in schools, especially primary schools, and talking to the younger generation about situations is something that I feel is very, very important. You can see that you spark ideas in their minds that at times everything seems to be closing in on the young generation. The computers, the cartoons they see, everything is so sort of action-packed and full on and basically visually rather boring, I think. And so to introduce ideas that can get them thinking in a different way and thinking outside the normal situations is really, really important and fundamental for, I think, the human race going forward. I don't know. Imagination.
Yeah, no, I co-sign all of that. It does. There are times sometimes where, I'm on a long drive with my daughter and she'll say, bearing in mind she's only 3, and she'll say, Daddy, I'm bored. And I have found myself saying to her, I'm like, we're in the South Downs National Park. We're driving. You've got the golden hour. How are you bored, young lady? Like, look around you. And she's like, what am I looking at? I'm like, count the trees. Tell me how many trees you see. Tell me what different trees you see. Just start with something.
Name the trees.
Look at the world around you. But it's as you've said, even with the cartoons and consumption, it's all instant gratification. It's all million-mile-an-hour thinking. It's, you finish one job and you're already 3 days behind on the next job. And it's like that part where you're walking in Dorking, Heather, that really resonated with me. It's like, yes, who still goes on walks? Why do we not find the time to do that anymore? It's crazy.
Yeah, you're right.
It's crazy.
No, it is. I have to get a walk in. I mean, now it'll just be to the station to London. Fiona, what have you got coming up? You've got the film.
Well, I have to tell you that we've been invited. The film's been invited to the biggest art Biennale in Asia today. I got the email confirmation.
That's fantastic. Look at that. We've just had it. I've gone all pink. That's brilliant.
So I'll send you that later, and thank you for having us. And well, for me, as I said at the beginning, it's a whole new journey for me to actually promote a film that's actually going out into cinemas. So we're doing our best on a minuscule, PR budget, thanks to yourself and people like you for amplifying us a bit more. That really means a lot. And we hope more and more people will see it and be inspired to do more. And my next film will be on a financial.
Are you going to be having any type of press screening or world premiere in London? Or
well, we had one at the Tate Modern in June. We had a sellout show. We had 200 plus people, and
one night only though.
One night only. Yes. And we're in about 15 cinemas across the UK in small bits, but it's driving an audience. I'm hopeless at Instagram, and anyway, it's only to my friends, so it's not like to a big group. But we do have Johnny Tall, who's trying to distribute the film. So that'll be my journey, I have a feeling, for the next few months, which is not a bad one.
Yep. That's going to be your journey. Absolutely. Well, I'll end it there. Thank you all so much for joining me on the channel today. I know we've gone a little bit longer than I had planned, but I think we had a good conversation. Lots of hot topical points. For my usual audience, I appreciate this was a bit more politically charged than your average movie chat, but I think for a movie like this, you can't really separate the two. They very much go hand in hand. The film discussion and politics, just the way art and activism went hand in hand, ironically. But for everyone who's subscribed to the channel, please, as I say always, long love cinema. Please do head out and support independent cinema, support the people who are out there saying something that matters, as well as going to your Star Wars and Marvel movies. All cinema is important. Everything must be watched. But my job here on the channel, as all of you know watching, is to shine a light on the people who don't have, as Fiona has just testified, the hundreds of millions of dollars of marketing budget. So I do what I can here to make sure movies like this get seen. So thank you all for watching. Subscribe to the channel if it's your first time here, and I'll see you all very soon. Fiona, Dan, and Heather, thank you for joining me on the Silver Screen Dudes, and good luck with your next adventure.
Thank you.